Week 11 of the fantasy football season kicks off tonight between the New York Jets and the New England Patriots in what should be a very fruitful day for those Patriots players. Now, while that game is very important, we have a ton of games this weekend between big games between the Chiefs and the Broncos, the Seahawks and the Rams, the Eagles and the Lions. We have a loaded week 11 slate, and this week is more meaningful than ever for a lot of teams that are competing for a fantasy football playoff spot. So I'm here to tell you some of the borderline options at each position that you need to get in your starting lineup or get out of your starting lineup to move closer towards that playoff berth or continue these trends you are already on. Let's get into this video here on Blitz Sports Media. What's going on, everybody? I'm Blitz Lincoln. Let's start off with the quarterback position, and we're going to start with Joe Flacco. Mr. No wonder he doesn't age because he has Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and he's utilizing Chase Brown as well. Joe Flacco's late career resurgence has been very impressive over his 4 starts in his Cincinnati Bengals career. He's averaging 25 points per game, 340 yards twice, and at least 3 touchdowns in 3 of those games. It helps that the Cincinnati Bengals defense is incredibly bad, with Joe Flacco having over 45 attempts in 3 of those games. This week, he gets the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he already torched them earlier on a couple weeks ago, 342 yards and 3 scores, and they've already surrendered 5 performances over 20 points to quarterbacks. So with Joe Flacco, I feel incredibly confident that he has a big day against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. And we're going to look at the other side of the matchup as another must-start quarterback, and that is Aaron Rodgers of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I absolutely love A-Rod this week against the Cincinnati Bengals after posting 3 straight 17-point outings 3 weeks ago. He's come down to earth over the past 2 weeks. He's only totaled 18.5 points over the last 2 starts, and a majority of his outlook has struggled this year because of the weapons he has for Pittsburgh. 65% of his yardage this year has been after the catch, and his ADOT ranks near the bottom half of the NFL. This plays very well into Cincinnati's hands, who, while the second most points to the quarterback position, have one of the highest missed tackle rates in the NFL. And Aaron Rodgers already torched this defense, throwing 4 touchdowns and 250 yards the last time they matched up. Aaron Rodgers is a guy that I have to get in my starting lineup this week. Dak Prescott is another must start, and Prescott struggled like Rodgers over the last 2 weeks. He was averaging nearly 23 fantasy points per game after the bye week. He had 4 straight 20-plus point performances, and then the 2 weeks before this bye week, only 22 total points. So with Dak Prescott, a little bit of a slump, but I feel very confident that he's going to bounce back after those matchups were a little bit tough. The Cowboys still rank second in pass rate over expectation, and then Dak Prescott gets the Las Vegas Raiders, who, sure, they look decent in terms of on-paper matchups and how they performed against quarterbacks, but any sort of good passing offense this year has been able to exploit Las Vegas and put up gaudy numbers in fantasy football, and I expect Dak Prescott to get back on track this week. As far as quarterbacks, I'm sitting Baker Mayfield will not be getting back on track this week, and he's obviously had a bit of a mountain to climb in terms of his fantasy injuries, the offensive line struggling. He's definitely had it out for him. And last week against the Bills, he had one of his better performances against a tougher matchup in the last 4 weeks. But 2 of the 3 games before that, he scored 12 fantasy points or less since Mike Evans went down with an injury. He's been okay in terms of production, but what's more concerning for me is he ranks 20th among quarterbacks in points per dropback and 18th in expected points per game at the position. So with Baker Mayfield, he gets the Buffalo Bills defense, who rank top 5 against quarterbacks and top 10 in nearly major every efficiency metric, and also ranked third in terms of pass rush wins this year as well as sacks. So with Buffalo, it's a tough matchup for Tampa Bay. I don't expect Baker Mayfield to have a monster day. The next guy I'm sitting is MVP candidate Sam Darnold. He's been so good this season, incredibly efficient, top 5 in EPA, first in yards per attempt, second in highly accurate throw rate, and he is dominating in Clint Kubiak's offense with 17 touchdowns. But the thing with Sam Darnold is he doesn't get a ton of volume. He only had 12 pass attempts last week due to the blowout against the Arizona Cardinals, and he's had 3 20-plus point performances in his last 5 games. The other 2 games were under 10 points. And now he gets to the Los Angeles Rams, who rank top 10 in multiple defensive pass metrics, including passer rating, yards per attempt allowed. And I think the Rams, who are going to provide a lot of pressure against the Seattle Seahawks this upcoming week, are going to give Darnold some fits, who still struggles against pressure at times, and we've seen that this year. So with Sam Darnold, I'm a little bit concerned that he matches that quarterback 1 expectation we have for him, and he's a guy I am sitting this week. The next guy I'm sitting is Jared Goff for the Detroit Lions, who is coming off a 300-yard, 3-touchdown performance with Dan Campbell as his offensive play caller for the first time ever. Goff has had an underrated season. He today ranks fifth in yards per attempt, seventh in accuracy metrics, and second in catchable target rate, which shows his production really hasn't dipped. He's also had three 19 plus point performances in his last 5 games. This week, though, Goff gets the Philadelphia Eagles, who have been really good at limiting quarterback production this season. They've allowed the fewest passing touchdowns, ranked top 10 in both passing yards and fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, and only 2 quarterbacks have thrown multiple touchdown passes against them. With Goff having little rushing upside, I don't think he's going to be in for a great game in week 11. Let's get to the running back position. Jaylen Warren is the first running back you need to get in your lineup. And I know Warren isn't the flashiest player. His production has definitely been tied to matchups this year, but the last time he faced off against the Bengals, he had 158 total yards, finished as the RB7 that week, and he is averaging 17 touches for 86 total yards per game. Cincinnati, like I mentioned before, struggling at tackling players. They've allowed the most rushing yards, second most yards after contact, and the third highest explosive run rate since week 6, with Warren's snap share approaching that 79% mark with Kenneth Gainwell's role decreasing. He is going to be the biggest beneficiary of this matchup. Expect Jaylen Warren to be in for an RB1 performance this week. On the other side of the matchup, I know I did this with the quarterbacks, but it is Chase Brown getting in that must-start conversation. Brown has averaged 14.6 touches and 91.5 total yards per game during that stretch. His match has been impressive. 8th in explosive run rate, 3rd in missed tackle rate, and it's been the big shift in this team going under center that has helped this running game be more efficient. Samaje Perine is not practicing. It's likely that he is going to be out this week, and Brown against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, which is supposedly a tough matchup on paper, he dominated them last time and had a very nice day, over 100 rushing yards, and the receiving volume over the last 2 games has resulted in back-to-back 19-point performances. Chase Brown is in for a really solid week against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. And then the last guy that's a must start is Woody Marks, the new RB1 in Houston. He's gained control of this backfield, played 80% of snaps last week, and finished with 16 touches for 81 total yards, finishing as the RB11 this week. He ranks 25th in the NFL in explosive run rate, and over the past 4 games, he's averaged 13.5 touches and at least 12 in 4 of his last 6 contests. His opponent this week, the Tennessee Titans, who have struggled to contain the run as of late. Since week 6, they've allowed the 9th most rushing yards and 12th most explosive runs in the NFL. Titans have also allowed the 5th most points allowed to the position, and Woody Marks himself had a monster day against this Tennessee Titans defense not that long ago, scoring 27 fantasy points. Woody Marks, get him in your lineup. He's in for a great week. As far as running backs, I'm sitting Kamani Vidal for the Los Angeles Chargers. He is going to struggle this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been one of the more underrated run defenses in the NFL. They're allowing the 5th lowest explosive run rate in football, and against zone running schemes, which make up 60.4% of Kamani Vidal's rushing attempts, he's only averaging 3.9 yards per carry, and the Jaguars are right around that mark as well. So it's a tough matchup. Vidal ranks as the RB16 points per game since Amarian Hampton got hurt. And this defense has been very good against the run. We've seen Vidal be very inconsistent. I think this is one of those weeks where the Chargers are going to exploit the better matchup on the outside against their passing attack versus the run. I'm not super high on Kamani Vidal this week. The next guy I'm not so high on is David Montgomery for the Detroit Lions. And a lot of people will look at Philadelphia's raw rushing numbers and be like, oh, Monty's a good start. Not necessarily. Montgomery over his last 4 games has only averaged 8.8 fantasy points per game and top 40 yards just once during that stretch. He's only had a true 4.1 yards per carry and ranks outside the top 30 in evaded tackles per game. While Philadelphia's rushing numbers don't look great, they still are top 10 in the NFL in rush DVOA, and they've only surrendered 8 touchdowns this year. We know that Monty, without his receiving workload, needs to get in the end zone to have a nice fantasy day. I don't think it's going to happen against the Eagles, so I am fading him. The other guys that I'm fading are Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker for the Seattle Seahawks. This has been a frustrating split the entire year, with Kenneth Walker actually playing a significant amount more snaps than Charbonnet, but Charbonnet still is getting a ton of touches when he's on the field. This season, Charbonnet's averaging 3.3 yards per carry, but has a lot of touchdowns in the prior few weeks, 5 times since week 4. Kenneth Walker, 4 straight games without a touchdown, hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points since week 4, despite seeing more touches and snaps than Charbonnet over that stretch. Now both these guys get the Los Angeles Rams, who have the fewest fantasy points to running backs this year, 5th fewest rushing yards, and rank among the better defenses at limiting touchdowns. Both these guys are in for a rough week against the Los Angeles Rams. All right, let's get into the wide receiver position. We're going to start with the Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver 1, Devonta Smith. No, it's not A.J. Brown anymore. He even said, if you got me in fantasy, you cannot trust me anymore. We know that's where this direction was heading. Devonta Smith, though, has been really underrated this year. He's a wide receiver 13 in points per game, commanding a 26.1% target share and a 37.9 air yard share. And he's been really good in first read share as well, 32.5%. Smith is averaging 73 yards per game. He gets Detroit this week. That's allowing the sixth most receiving yards per game overall, and he scored at least 14.4 points in three straight contests. Well, everybody will talk about AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. Everybody's like, oh, he's still volatile. Don't know that I can trust him for sure. I guarantee you that Devonta Smith is going to be in for another big game. This is how the offense has been shifting, and this is Smith's passing game to lose right now. The next guy I am starting is Quentin Johnston for the Los Angeles Chargers. Everybody's a little bit bullish on QJ, but I'm kind of high on him against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Over the last two games, Johnston has seen a 21% target share, 22.9% air yard share, and he's averaging 47.5 receiving yards during that stretch. Not necessarily great numbers, but what's encouraging is he saw 10 targets this past week in week 10, which is super encouraging. Now he gets Jacksonville to allow the fourth most PPR points per target and the ninth most receiving yards per game to outside receivers. We know Ladd is in the slot. He's going to get his, but it's a competition between Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston. Over the last 3 weeks, it seems like Quentin Johnston has been more heavily involved, and I think he's going to be the biggest beneficiary this week against a Jaguars defense that struggles against perimeter receivers. Now, the sneakiest start of the week is Christian Watson for the Green Bay Packers. I think he's in for a monster week against the New York Giants, and this is the week the Packers passing game rebounds. Since week 8, he's operated as the team's primary deep threat. 50% of his 12 targets have been coming down the field with a 25.8 average depth of target, which is insane. He only has an 11-point target share, but he has a 38.2% air yard share. He's been the most consistent option in this Packers passing game as of late, with Romeo Doubs getting banged up. Jaden Reed's been hurt. Tucker Kraft tore his ACL. Watson has been the most consistent producer over this last 2-week stretch since he returned from injury. Now he gets the Giants, who allowed the seventh most PPR points per target and the fifth most deep passing yards in the NFL since week 6. I think Christian Watson is a high upside flex this week in week 11. Wide receivers, I'm sitting DK Metcalf for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Metcalf has been nowhere to be found on the fantasy landscape as of late. He's averaging 55.8 receiving yards per game and a 19.9% target share. Okay numbers to say the least, but he's failed to reach double-digit PPR points in 3 of his last 5 games, and he just has one top 20 finish during that stretch. It's not super enticing, and I think one of the more underrated players in football is DJ Turner for the Cincinnati Bengals. He held Rome Odunze to a big donut a few weeks ago. And then obviously Turner himself, third ranked cover grade according to PFF. Last time these two faced off, Metcalf had a pretty quiet day, 45 yards on 4 targets. Unless DK Metcalf is getting designed targets underneath, I don't expect him to have a good day. And I'm sitting DK Metcalf despite the Cincinnati Bengals being really bad on defense. Wan'Dale Robinson is the next guy I'm sitting this week, and Wan'Dale has been much better this season, averaging 60 yards per game, 23.5% target share, 28.3% first read share, heavily involved in short and intermediate routes, and also getting more deep looks than he's seen in the past. But over the past few weeks, 0 red zone looks. Theo Johnson's completely taken that over. And the Green Bay Packers have been incredibly good against slot receivers, allowing the second fewest yards in the NFL. We don't know how Jameis Winston is going to profile his targets to his receivers, and typically is historically funneled targets to his perimeter receivers. So I expect him to have a down day in fantasy football in a tough matchup. The final guy I'm sitting is Xavier Worthy against the Denver Broncos. Since Rashee Rice returned, he hasn't finished higher than the wide receiver 38 in a week, just averaging 37 receiving yards in a game. He's seen a 17.5% target share during that stretch. Not great, but he still has a 24% first read share. He hasn't been able to turn his design targets into big play abilities, and he's not really getting red zone work anymore as well. So with that, he's not getting the volume he needs and the impactful targets he needs, plus 0 red zone work. Not looking great. Now he gets Denver, who's allowed the fewest points to perimeter receivers this year and the 4th fewest points per target to perimeter receivers since week 6. Not good. So Xavier Worthy deserves to be on your bench this week in fantasy football. The guy that I'm starting at tight ends, and let's kick off this tight end list, is the tight end 15 this year, Kyle Pitts. He owns a 19.8% target share, and he's averaging 47 receiving yards per game this year. Pitts has been maintained a very steady role around the goal line as well, seeing some targets around there. Dropped a touchdown last week in what could have been a much better performance in a favorable matchup, but he leads the Falcons in catches over the last month and ranks second on the team in targets and receiving yards. It feels like he is a leapfrog Darnell Mooney in terms of the passing depth Now he gets the Panthers, who have been incredibly undervalued in terms of a matchup to target for the tight end position. They've allowed the sixth most receiving yards per game and the fifth most fantasy points per game to the position. I know their adjusted points are a little bit scarier, but this is a defense that I mentioned last week. Juwan Johnson, great start against them, had a monster day. So I am trusting Kyle Pitts with a ton of confidence. Travis Kelce is one that a lot of people will debate this week because he faces the Denver Broncos, but Kelce has been actually really good this season in what feels like a bounce back year for the veteran. 12.8 points per game, 41 catches, 540 yards, and 3 touchdowns. His target share and first read share haven't shifted much since the return of Rashee Rice. If anything, it has helped his yards after the catch increase as well. What's encouraging for him is that the Denver Broncos have actually allowed the most yards per reception to tight ends and have struggled against interior passing options against too high looks, which is something the Chiefs get almost more than every other team in the NFL. Kelce is going to be heavily involved in this game plan as the Denver Broncos will focus on slowing down Rashee Rice over the middle of the field. And I think Kelce is in for a very nice day. So if you're hesitant about Travis Kelce facing the Broncos, don't worry. I like Travis Kelce this week. Theo Johnson is another tight end that I find myself starting against the Green Bay Packers this week. Over the last 6 games, 41.3 receiving yards per game, 18.8% target share, ranking as the tight end 13 over that stretch. Also has a 21.4% first read share as well. The red zone targets are there. He scored a ton of touchdowns. And I know Jackson Dart has been incredibly beneficial for his fantasy production, but this week is another week where I feel confident starting him because Jameis Winston has thrown the ball a ton in his career. And then also the matchup. Green Bay, if they do struggle in the passing game, it is against the tight end position at times. Allow the ninth most receiving touchdowns to tight ends overall, and that bodes very well for Theo Johnson entering this week. As far as tight ends I'm sitting, let's look at the other side of the matchup. Luke Musgrave, the replacement for Tucker Kraft, was abysmal, like predicted in week 10 against Philadelphia. 76% route share, managed 23 yards on 3 targets, and had an ADOT of 3.3 yards without Tucker Kraft. I'm going to tell you guys this right now. He is not going to replace the production of Tucker Kraft. It's not a one-for-one replacement like a lot of people were hoping for. He was never worth a priority waiver ad. The tight ends position for the Green Bay Packers offense never has had an elite target share. So this week he gets the New York Giants, who have been one of the stingier defenses against tight ends as well. Just 4.3 receptions per game to the position. Guys, Luke Musgrave is fool's gold. Do not trust this guy in your starting lineup this week. Cade Otton's another guy that I think a lot of people will be chasing his prior production in a very tough matchup. He's averaged 63.8 receiving yards per contest since week 5 with a 21.4% target share. His 2.2 yards per route run are solid, and it definitely provides a vertical floor, but he hasn't received a single red zone target during that stretch, and he's tight end 11. It feels like he's playing at his ceiling right now, and Buffalo is the worst matchup for tight ends. They've surrendered the fewest receiving yards and fantasy points to the tight end position this year, and no tight end has top 50 yards against him. If he's not getting involved in the red zone and he's not going to top 50 yards, that's screaming under 10 points, and I don't want that in my lineup. Let's go with the guy who's a lineup lock not to get 10 points, and that's TJ Hawkinson this year with JJ McCarthy under center. Over their 4 games together, Hawkinson hasn't topped 15 yards in any outing and is just averaging 11.1% of the team's targets. That's abysmal work, and he's only at 0.45 yards per route run during that stretch. McCarthy does not get the passing volume. He does not push the ball inside. He's a dump down guy to the running back. And I know Chicago's defense is a great matchup, allowing the 11th most points to tight ends over this season, but it's not good. You can't trust a guy that's averaging 4.7 points, even if his name value, and he might not be as bad as his production's been this year, right, you can't trust TJ Hawkinson this week. Let's get into the defenses, and let's start with Baltimore. They get Cleveland. Dylan Gabriel has been really bad over the last 3 games. Baltimore's racked up 23 fantasy points. Definitely a matchup I'm looking to target for a team that has allowed 83 total quarterback pressures this year. The Houston Texans are another one. They get their division rival, the Tennessee Titans, and the Texans look to add a little bit, of a win streak here and potentially push into that closer mix. We know the Titans are a great matchup, 14.4 points per game this year. Definitely a matchup you want to target. And then the Atlanta Falcons against the Carolina Panthers. I know they struggled against them last time, but the Panthers have been really bad on offense over the past few weeks, and the Falcons pass rush should be able to exploit this Panthers offense if they are able to slow down the run, which I think they will make some adjustments this week after their loss earlier this year. Defenses, I'm sitting the Philadelphia Eagles against the Detroit Lions. I know the Eagles are really good, and they might have a nice day against Detroit, but not a matchup you start them. Detroit has been so good over the past few seasons that, being a matchup you don't want on fantasy. So don't start the Eagles this week. Tampa Bay, same type of story. You're facing the Bills. They're coming off of a loss. Can't trust them. The Tampa Bay defense is nowhere near the talent of Philly, and I'm telling you guys to sit Philly. As far as kickers go, Evan McPherson's been really hot since Joe Flacco took over quarterback. The Steelers are allowing the second most points to kickers. So you got to start Evan McPherson. And then Eddie Pinheiro has also been hot, 11 points or more in 4 of his last 6 games. Should be a really nice option against the Arizona Cardinals. And then kickers, I'm sitting. Matt Prater's only topped 10 points once since week 2. The Bills aren't really kicking field goals at a high rate this year. Don't trust Matt Prater. And then the final guy, Chad Ryland. He's been really good at times this year for the Cardinals, but he's going to struggle. They don't have Marvin Harrison Jr. anymore, and the 49ers rank among top 10 against kickers this year. Going to be in for a disappointing performance. Well, if you made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate it. Drop any sort of start and sit questions you have down in the comment section below. We are doing our live start and sit Q&A at 9 p.m. Eastern time here on this channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and you will be reminded that we have that, and I will answer all your questions live. Really appreciate you guys making it to the end of the video, and I will catch you guys next time on Blitz Sports Media.